The general was dying. Still the governor of Kentucky, once the general's West Point classmate, begged to see him. "I'm here, my dear old enemy," his guest began, "to make certain that you know that the kindness you showed us Confederates at Appomattox is still remembered. When you forbade our humiliation after our defeat, you won our undying admiration." This brought a small smile to the stricken face of General Ulysses S. Grant. Introduction. Many people know the American Civil War ended at a place called Appomattox. What few know is how amazing an ending it was, that the kindness and civility shown between the two armies there made it seem like real healing could happen, and soon, between the South and North and between the white and black races. But then the forces of revenge gained the upper hand, and the path of healing became far harder and more halting even to this day. Still, it helps to know how close we came. Here then is the story of the promise that Appomattox once held. The American Civil War began in 1861, when 11 southern states decided they wanted to become a separate nation, to grow their slave economy as they saw fit. But President Lincoln stood firm. The United States, he said, could not be divided into separate nations, and while slavery was allowed in the South by the Founding Fathers, it could not spread to other parts of the country. This conflict in views led to civil war between the southern states called the Confederacy, fought by gray-clad rebels, and the northern states called the Union, fought by blue-clad Yankees. For 4 long years the killing was vicious, with over 700,000 soldiers dying and no end to the bloodshed in sight, until the second Sunday of April, 1865. On that Sunday morning, when the brilliant top commander of the South, General Lee, crested a hill on his favorite horse Traveler, there before him stood blue Yankee soldiers for as far as he could see, in every direction. Surrounded, Lee sent a white flag of surrender to Grant, the top Northern general. And Grant, knowing how hard this must be on Lee, told the messenger, "Tell General Lee I'll come talk with him wherever he wishes." The place selected was a brick house in the small village of Appomattox, nestled in the rolling hills of Virginia. The Southern General Lee arrived at the house first, wearing a crisp new uniform with a dazzling yellow sash, knowing, as he did, that many Northerners wanted to see him face a firing squad, and he intended to meet his fate with dignity. But President Lincoln scorned the idea of revenge. Firing squads, he argued, won't help reunite this country. To Grant he said, "In victory, let's go easy." And together they agreed to extend an olive branch wherever possible, so they could put all their energy into healing the nation. When General Grant finally arrived at the village house, he was in a crumpled blue shirt, caked with mud, with just the stars on his shoulders, showing his superior rank. Entering the parlor, Grant greeted Lee courteously, apologizing for his appearance. Then, after chatting a little bit about their military days after West Point, he sat down to tell Lee the fate of his army. "Tell your men," said Grant, "that if they promise to fight no more, they can all go home." Home? Everyone? Thought Lee. He was astonished. After, that is, they formally surrender their weapons, all their rifles and muskets," continued Grant, "though their own personal guns they may keep." "And horses?" asked Lee. "Well, it will soon be time for spring planting, and they'll be needing horses for that, so yes, horses too." Home, with guns and horses, Lee accepted such generous terms without hesitating. "These conditions," he commented, "will have the best possible effect upon my men. But may I make a request? My troops have gone days without food, and I have none for them." "I will see to it," said Grant, "that food for your men and their horses will be on its way within the hour." "I am grateful," replied Lee as the two generals stood, said goodbye, and departed, whereupon every Union officer waiting outside raised his hat in salute to the defeated general. The next day Grant met with Lee to tell him that he would shortly be leaving for Washington, before the formal surrender, thereby indicating that Lee too was free to depart, and thus be spared watching his men give up their arms. As Lee prepared to go, he pledged, "Please tell Mr. Lincoln that I will do all I can to help rebuild the Union." When Grant met for a last time with his staff, he instructed them, "Remember, these Southerners are now fellow countrymen. Make certain they're treated as such. And no victory celebrations. Let's not add to their misery." Thus the generals left Appomattox, expecting the considerate tone of their exchanges to be carried on in their absence, and it was. The formal surrender of arms was scheduled for 2 days later. Grant insisted on this ceremony to reinforce for everyone, for the world, that under President Lincoln the United States would remain a single nation, and now one without slavery. A cause for jubilation among the 2,000 war-hardened black Union soldiers at Appomattox. The Yankee general in charge of the surrender was Chamberlain, who, though he'd been shot in the chest just 2 weeks earlier, was there, astride his horse at the head of his troops on Wednesday morning, awaiting the arrival of the defeated rebels. And soon they appeared, threadbare and shoeless, but marching in perfect swing step behind their commander, General Gordon. "I could see those Confederates were gaunt and worn," wrote Chamberlain, "yet they stood proudly erect, looking us level in the eye." Moved by this, Chamberlain, without any forethought, shouted out the command, "Carry arms!" causing thousands of Yankees to snap to attention as they shouldered their rifles, giving their foes the known salute of honor among soldiers. Seeing this salute, Gordon, the Southern commander, slowly brought his horse to a standstill directly facing Chamberlain, and with a slight kick had his horse bow down as he withdrew his saber and solemnly touched it to the toe of his boot, thus returning honor with honor. Then Gordon, too, ordered his troops to carry arms, to present a display of mutual regard between hard-fought rivals. And for the next 7 hours the two armies faced each other, with tears streaming from the eyes of the men on both sides. Seeing those rebels who'd fought so well standing there whipped, just seemed to us altogether sad," wrote one Yankee soldier. Such were the feelings as the Confederate infantry stacked their rifles and their beloved bloodied battle flags, all the while in total silence. "Not a hoot or holler was heard from our side," wrote Chamberlain, "nor the sound of a drum or a cannon. Just an awful stillness filled that long day." At its close, Chamberlain bowed his head, praying, "May God forgive us all." Every man here fought his heart out, but it's over. Time for us all to go home and take up our lives in peace, and hopefully keep alive the spirit of goodwill we've known here at Appomattox. And indeed, the optimism among the soldiers heading home was high, racing to get to their families by Sunday for Easter. But that optimism faded before they even reached home, for on Good Friday, just 2 days after the formal surrender at Appomattox, a heartened President Lincoln sought relaxation at a play at Ford's Theater, where an assassin shot him at close range, and at 7:22 on Saturday morning he died. Thus, Easter Sunday broke not to the promise of healing, but to the sad news that the one man who most wanted to gather the South and North into his embrace was gone, and with his death his vision slipped behind a cloud. The vision of a quick healing that would give the people in every state and of every race a chance for a life of freedom and prosperity. And still to this day we have yet to fully dispel that cloud, although we continue to try to fulfill the spirit of brotherhood and reconciliation that Lincoln and Grant and Lee promoted through the generosity and mutual regard they extended to one another long ago at Appomattox.